Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do.
But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long stepping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy.
They're just gonna remember some guys now.
Man, I'm so hyped right now. Anything is possible. Anything is Remember That Guy, the show where we monitor memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players past and present. Hey there, folks. It's me, one of your hosts, James, part of the very greatest Big Three. Let's see who else we got as part of that trio today.
I'll claim the Ray Allen spot. Definitely more of a shooter in my pickup game. Diaz back with you once again, which means that we do have a very special guest with us. He is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please introduce yourself.
Fuck that, I'm not Paul Pierce. Give me Rajon Rondo instead. The true third member of that team.
Choosing to be Rajon Rondo in place of Paul Pierce is a choice, and we can leave it at that.
Hey, only one of those two players shit themselves on the court, and it's not Rondo.
Rondo did a lot of shitting on the court. I don't know if you remember that Mavericks period. It was really bad. Mavericks Rondo's one of the worst highly paid basketball players I've ever watched.
But did actual feces come out of him on the court?
I mean, who am I to talk about star players having bathroom problems in the last few years? But Xavier, is it bathroom problems that have made memories for you this week?
No, there's a lot of other things that are good making memories for me. First off, I do want to give a quick shout out to Temple women's basketball. Last year, fucking terrible. 11-18, third bottom in the conference. I haven't made the NCAA tournament in 7 years. I miss Dawn Staley. But they're actually having a really good year this year. They're 17-10, 11-4 in the conference, putting them first in the American with 3 games left. A couple big games, including against Tulsa, coming up, could really decide who gets the number 1 seed in the conference tournament. And they're doing it with a really balanced offense. Like I looked into it, of the 8 teams in the conference with winning records, almost all of them have a 20-point scorer. The ones that don't are, in the high teens. Temple does not have anyone averaging more than 12 points a game. They're led by Aaliyah Nelson, Baltimore legend, and they have 7 players averaging between 6 and 12. It's just a balanced attack where no one is more important than the other. And they wouldn't make the tournament as an at-large, but it would be really exciting to see them win the American and make it back to the NCAAs, even if it does end up as a projected 15 seed right now.
It would be an honor for Temple to lose to Dawn Staley in South Carolina, I think, in the run to another championship.
I always feel like the committee, I feel like, does fun things like that when they can. Like, they're not going to completely misseed a team, but they're like, we got to South Carolina sitting on the 2 line. We've got this Temple sitting on the 15 line.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we send the Owls for sacrifice? Because that's the only way that we'll get ratings on that game.
I would enjoy that. I would enjoy that very much. But, fingers crossed, we'll see what happens with the last couple games of the season. And, hopefully they can, continue this upward trajectory. Someone at Temple has to be good. And it's not any of the men's teams right now. So leave it up to the women. But the other thing that's been making memories for me has been Arsenal. Because Arsenal has been phenomenal over the past month. And when I'd say phenomenal, I mean like actually record-breaking. They are 6 for 6 for their games since the start of the calendar year in the Premier League. And they've scored 25 goals and only conceded 3, which is pretty good. It's only 2 less than the record for most goals scored in a 6-game period. And they're facing the worst team in the league next week. And if they score 5, then they'll set the record for most goals scored in a 7-game period. And there's a good chance that will happen because they've already put 5 past them once before this year.
Careful, you might fuck around and get me interested in soccer if there's a team averaging 4 goals a game. I don't care how much a team is giving up. If a team is scoring 4 times a game, okay, we could start talking now.
All right, well, I mean, just to give you some context, so since the turn of the year, They beat Crystal Palace 5-0. Then there was a 2-1 against Nottingham Forest, 3-1 against Liverpool, 6-0 against West Ham, 5-0 against Burnley, and then unfortunately for Diaz, there was a 4-1 against Newcastle this past weekend.
But let's say, in fairness, and Xavier is witness, that I did predict immediately before that game started. I said 4-1 to the Gunners, and Femi said, "You're trying to jinx." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm just telling you what's going to happen."
Eugene was over, so I wasn't watching, but I did check the group chat afterwards, and Diaz did, in fact, predict 4-1, and was then very, very mad that he did not bet that scoreline to at least have made money off of Newcastle's pain. The thing about there is luck in sports, and there are a lot of teams that are outperforming their like underlying metrics. For example, Manchester United, I think, is 6th right now. Their underlying metrics say that they should be in the bottom 6. They've been really bad. Arsenal's metrics are not, misleading in this. There's a tweet from the XG philosophy from earlier today. Arsenal are averaging an XG supremacy of plus 2.8 per game over their last 6 Premier League matches. That's the best 6-game XG supremacy since our records began in 2014. So essentially saying over these 6 matches, just based off of the quality of chances that they're creating and giving up, they would be expected to win by 3 goals on average in all of them. And then when you combine that with the fact that they have by far the best defense in the league, it makes for a really potent combination. So this stat is from Opta. In 2024, Arsenal has given up 1.9 XG on defense. In comparison, Diaz's Newcastle, who are worse than the league in 2024, have given up 20.5. And the team that is closest to Arsenal, Manchester City, who are leading the league, are 6.8. So still almost 4 times as much conceded as Arsenal. So Arsenal are scoring for fun and not giving up any chances whatsoever. Like, of the 3 goals they've conceded, 1 was an own goal. The other 2 were very low percentage chances that just happened to go in. And it's just a really exciting time. I mean, right now, just based off of the schedule and how things have shaken out so far, they're not the favorites to win the title. It's still going to be City and then probably Liverpool, and with Arsenal coming up as the 3rd choice. But it's really hard to argue that they haven't been the best team in England over the past couple months. So we'll see whether that carries through. And then I'm excited because I'm going to go see Arsenal for the first time. And I can't wait to do that. July 31st, they're coming to Philly to play against Liverpool. And I did buy tickets for myself and friend of the show, Mr. Medicinal. And we're going to have a great time. And if any of our listeners want to come as well, please feel free to reach out. The more the merrier. It's going to be so fun. I can't wait. I'm so excited to see them for the first time. It's going to be a good time. So yeah, I'm just very happy about Arsenal right now. And I hope that Newcastle can make Diaz happy, because I know that he is literally watching them right now and I've been seeing his reactions. So I do not know what has happened.
Well, so yeah, soccer is great for you, Xavier. And it's really great. Right now, for me, it's really, really stressful. While you were saying that, Newcastle had a defender for Rovers save a shot off the line, and then we missed the open net. Then right on the other end, we had Dubravka make an incredible save 1-on-1. And then just back on the other side, we should have scored again. It's the 114th minute. I'm fucking dying out here. The Newcastle men are giving me nothing but stress. However, the Newcastle women are giving me nothing but great reason for celebration and incredible. Oh, my Harvey Barnes almost just scored a fucking wonder goal. Let me tell you who did score a wonder goal. It was 1-1 at St. James's Park this past Sunday. Newcastle playing host to Portsmouth in the semifinal of the FA Women's National Cup. This is a cup played for the 3rd and 4th levels of the women's football pyramid in England. And St. James's Park is, of course, the home men's stadium for Newcastle. Usually the women play Kingston Park, which is also used by the rugby team in Newcastle. A smaller venue, about 2,000 to 3,000. They sell it out every game. But for an occasion like this, They move it into the big stadium. Get 22,000. The capacity is 40,000. So 22,000, we're talking 4 or 5 times more than usually are going to see these games. What Newcastle did a really good job of is they sold all of the seats that you're going to see on TV. The lower bowl was entirely full.
That was my question. If they had like done what the Marlins used to do in Sharon with the Dolphins and stuff, like we're keeping everyone in the lower bowl.
Exactly. Yeah, and it was packed tight. I mean, not an empty seat amongst the sections that were sold. There was not a single empty seat. So a great strategy from that perspective. And what was really great about it is the women have benefited almost as much, if not more so, from the takeover than the men's club has. And they're doing it with a lot of the same players that they've had. It was Charlotte Potts to get the first goal and make the brave tackle at the end of the game to essentially seal it. It was Katie Barker playing the ball into Georgia Gibson for that winner in the 90th minute. These are all girls that have been with the team for 4 or 5 years. Grace Donnelly, the goalie, is actually the craziest story. Joined the team about 7 years ago. And when she joined the Newcastle women's side, it was essentially a rec league team. She had to pay to be able to play on the team. She had to pay for her share of the bus to get to the away games, had to pay for her uniform. And here she is now, still the goalie all these years later, making this crucial save late in the game to help preserve it for Newcastle. It's amazing. They're now going to go against #United in the final. And that's not their social media tag. That is first name #, last name United. I'm honestly not as familiar with their history, but Xavier, I know, can speak to it very well.
Yeah, so #United is essentially YouTuber Wrexham. I've been following the founder of #United on Twitter for almost a decade at this point. He got to start off doing YouTube videos and trick shots and things like that, and getting, other footballers to come on and do stuff with him. And he eventually said, hey, you know what? What's stopping me from making my own team? And the first #United was essentially like a travel squad with celebrities and other like retired soccer players on it. But eventually they applied for like recognition in the English pyramid. And over the past 7 years, they've moved up, I think 3, 4, 4 levels to, I think they're in the 7th tier now. And their women's team, they got successful enough where they were able to found a women's team, and the women's team's been doing the same. So it's actually a really interesting story. They have a little more money than other people in that level, but it started out as really just kind of like a fun YouTuber thing that they turned into an actual soccer team that, is fully self-funded. It's not like there are no millionaires, like Hollywood millionaires bankrolling #United. It's pretty much all self-contained at this point. So it is a fun story. I'll root for Newcastle, for the Newcastle ladies, because I want Diaz to be happy. But it is also
all Cinderella's
cool for
toys
#United.
do have to come to an end.
Eventually, the glass slipper shatters. The carriage turns back into a pumpkin. Hopefully, that is the moment for #United. But I just think it's fascinating to see, because what you don't have in the women's game, which you do have in the men's game, is in the men's game you have financial fair play, you have PSR, things that essentially regulate the amount that you are allowed to spend on the club. These regulations are non-existent in the women's game. And it's very encouraging to see in this time and era where we are trying to ask the hard questions. How do we get women's sports more to the forefront? And here are #United and Newcastle both saying, what if we just invest in them? And now they find themselves in the cup final. So we're very excited for that. The other fun thing about that is it's being played at Kenilworth Road, which is Luton Town's pitch. And usually most cup finals in England are played at Wembley, very famously. But there was, I guess it's the 50th anniversary of the English women's team played one of their first games at that field. So this is being done to honor that, but it's going to be sold out. I think they see 10,000 there, and Newcastle just brought out 23 for a semifinal. So
it's almost a bummer they can't get more tickets. Marge Schott would be so pissed off. No, I can't bring her back up for another week. My God.
But How it is, it's the 120th plus one right now. Looks like we're going to a penalty shootout. God, I fucking hate the men's team. But the women's team is doing nothing but making great memories.
Your relationship with Newcastle running hot and cold. I'd like to, if you all don't mind, just go cold. Because I got a couple things from the ice that I want to report. First off, I became aware of the work of one Stefan Raab this week. This is a German. He's a visionary. Full disclaimer, like many German visionaries, he is super problematic, and I have found that in later looking, so I'm just acknowledging that. But I do have to share this story that is his brainchild. He is a creative person. He works in television. He's been involved with a number of German Eurovision entries, including a winning entry in 2010. But I found out about Stefan Raab because I saw a clip going around online of some alternative programming leading up to the big game a couple weeks back. We all already enjoy the Puppy Bowl. But it turns out even we who watch the Puppy Bowl are missing out on the actual best alternative programming that day, which was American Ice Football, an 8v8 American football game being played on a literal hockey rink, wearing bowling shoes because the ice was not slippery enough on its own. They had to get frictionless bowling shoes, just basically shuffling with the ball. And the very best part of this maybe 35-second clip is someone kicking an extra point. And while they make it, they do fall flat on their ass in making that kick. And it's just hysterical.
And I'm assuming they only have Eurovision songs playing in the background.
It didn't get any sound. Don't know if that was a copyright issue. Don't know if that was a problem with the German television network, but did not get any sound.
I would assume it's just Sandstorm on a loop for the entire game.
Anyway, one place where I did get a lot of sound, I got to hear a raucous crowd from afar in Vancouver this week, because we'll step out of the rink. We'll go rink side, where Vancouver fans had seen the team get its very first L3 and its very first L4 of the season very recently. And frankly, kind of looking like shit during those 4 games. We're coming back to Rogers. It's our one-time hosting Boston this year, who dredged up all of the 2011 nightmares with the 4-0 win in Boston earlier this season. Very clearly set up to be like the low point of the season if it's going to happen. And sure enough, Boston goes up 2-0. This is really going to be the nadir so far of what has otherwise been a pretty pleasant surprise. But then it turns out that there were a pair of aces up the sleeve of the Vancouver Canucks, because after an 8-year absence, we saw the return of 2012 ESPN Hall of Fame inductees Force and Sully, aka the Green Men. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the story of the Green Men in Vancouver, these are Adam Forsyth and Ryan Sullivan, a pair of, at the time when this first started in the late 2000s, early 2010s, a couple of mid-20-somethings. And they, like many of us, saw the episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia where Charlie wears a morph suit. So they went out and got their own morph suits. Huge sliding doors moment. They actually got those apparently for a Seattle Seahawks game that they had tickets to in Seattle. Didn't get them in time. The day they arrived, they had tickets to a Canucks game. So they're like, all right, well, we're just going to wear them here. And it immediately became a hit. They were a fixture in seats that I believe they were getting through corporate season tickets for one of their employers. Very frequently shown up next to the penalty box. That's where their seats were specifically. And they had all kinds of antics, throwing waffles around to mock the comments of a Toronto Maple Leafs player holding up a giant cardboard cutout of naked Ryan Kessler for his ESPN The Body issue, doing magic tricks with the Canadian recording artists. They were a huge part of the 2011 Cup Finals run, we should say. And after the NHL kind of had them tone it down a couple of times, they eventually vamoosed for a while until this evening, February 24th, 2024. They come back, this surprise reappearance, this had not been broadcast to us ahead of time. We were not all anticipating the return of the Green Men, but a truly jamming standing ovation from the crowd at that point, which seemed to do something to the team. The waffles, once again, were flying. They did get down to the penalty box and let some waffles fly. And they managed to tie it up in the third, send it to overtime. And just a little bit later, Brock Besser scored his second of the night. And I gotta say, you got Bess with his career high in goals right now. You got Demko looking like he might actually become the first Vancouver goalie to get a Vezina, despite, the many deserving seasons prior to this. You got hometown Arshdeep Bains, who's the 4th ever Punjabi player in the NHL, 3 of whom have played for the incredibly Southeast Asian Vancouver area Canucks. And with all that, and with the Green Men coming back, I'm not ready to say that it's the year, but it is starting to feel.
Is it the year?
It's not the year. That I can say that confidently.
It's possibly the year. It's possibly the year. But that is a great story, James. And you did remind me of something that I wanted to bring up that's also Western Canadian hockey related. There was a really, really good article in The Athletic a couple days ago about the Winnipeg Jets. For those who don't know, the Jets are good this year. They're 3rd in the West, just 2 points off the Stars for the lead in the Central. But they are hemorrhaging money because they already have one of the smallest arenas in the league. They have one of the smallest population bases of any team in North American sports. There's barely over 1 million people in Manitoba. For context, even in Alberta, that has 2 teams, Edmonton and Calgary, has well over 4 million people. So they have a pretty low base of fans to start out with, but they're struggling to the point where their season ticket holders have fallen 30% in just 3 years, to the point where they have said, if we can't get back to this number, we don't think we can stay in Winnipeg, which would be really sad because they already left the city once to go to Atlanta and then came back. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with Winnipeg. I like small market teams, but it might just be that in Canada, at least, where there's already a pretty a saturation of the bigger markets having teams, it's just not feasible. We'll see what happens. It'll be really interesting, in my opinion.
Well, for our main course this week, we want to talk about one of the greatest honors that can possibly be bestowed upon an athlete. I think we can all agree that, at least in the service to a specific team respect, there is no greater honor than to have your number retired. And with the true greats of the sport, you can just say the number and the team, and we instantly know who you're talking about. 23 for the Bulls, 12 for the Patriots, 42 for the Dodgers. These are all icons of their sports, but people forget that before Michael Jordan, there was Mike Bratz. Before Tom Brady, there was Tom Ramsey. Before Jackie Robinson, there was George Jeffcoat, which sounds like the whitest name possible, so it couldn't be more the opposite of Jackie Robinson. But with every great number, there is that guy who was the last to wear it before him. So what we want to talk about this week is guys who were second to last to wear a number. Just like last week, I'm going to stay in the world of hoops, and I'm going to talk about another guy who is a part of that 50-point club that Corey Brewer joins. He had a much deeper bag, though, and I'm mostly talking about his incredible range as a shooter. But he also had a lot of range off the court. He was also a very successful rapper, and he is actually the voice behind the original theme song of the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast. Today, I don't want to talk about a 6-foot guard from Georgetown. I do want to talk about a 5'10 guard from Boston College for the Philadelphia 76ers, number 3, Dana Barros.
Dana Barros.
Now, he becomes a Philadelphian later in life, but he is a Bostonian by heart. He was born on a day that Xavier loves very much, April 13th, 1967.
Okay,
in a place
you're already pandering. I appreciate it.
But it was in a place that he doesn't love as much, Boston.
Okay, it's wiped out. It's back to a net zero at this point.
We're back to net neutral pandering. He was a hooper from a young age, and he combined a quick handle with a seemingly unlimited shooting range, especially in the era when he was growing up, when the three-point shot did not really exist yet. But he was still pulling from wherever. And the fact that there wasn't a three-point line makes it even more impressive that for his high school career, he tallied 1,821 points, started all 4 years, and he also set the Massachusetts state record when he scored 57 in a state tournament game his senior year. With this kind of talent, obviously, they're not going to let him go far. Boston College is going to keep him home, and he's going to join the Eagles. He's a 4-year starter at BC as well, and in his first season, Still no 3-point line. He averages 13.7 a game. But his sophomore year, he jumps all the way up to 18.1, thanks in part to shooting 40.5% from deep on 6 attempts a game. In this modern context, 6 threes a game sounds like, okay, yeah, a good 3-point shooter should be shooting at least 6 3-pointers a game. BC as a team shot 7.6 threes a game that year. Dana Barros took 6 of them.
80% of their 3-point shots.
He was a revolutionary, so far ahead of his time. I mean, that's just bonkers to think about. A 6 out of 7.6, basically at random, 2 other guys on the team might take a 3 the rest of the game. But by and large, it's all Dana Barros. His junior season, he averages 21.9 a game. This time shooting 45.4% from deep on 7.3 attempts a game. The team's starting to catch on a little bit. They're shooting 13 a game at this point. Senior year, he takes it up another notch. Averages 23.9 a game on 42.9% from deep on 9 attempts a game, as the team took 15.2 a game. So, for his time, a generational chucker, but shooting very high percentages as well. The best shot is the one that goes in, especially when it's a 3-pointer. On the back of this prolific shooting, even though he's only 5'10", he's coming out as a 4-year guy. He goes 16th overall in the 1989 NBA draft to the Seattle Supersonics. And the kind of idea that they have here is we have Gary Payton, this defensive-minded first guard. Maybe we get Dana Barros, we bring him in, he can be our offensive-minded guard. And maybe this is going to be a tandem that we'll have going forward. Rookie year, he starts 20 games with the Sonics. Averages 9.7 a game on 39.9% from deep. So even with that further back line, still shooting a pretty good percentage from deep. But he's only doing it on about 3 attempts a game. His second year, he sees his minutes fall from 20 to about 12. He's shooting 39.5% from deep, but only on 1 attempt a game. And he's starting to seemingly fall out of favor a little bit. In his third year, he starts to embrace his 6th man role. And with that acceptance comes pretty strong improvement in the 3-point department. He leads the league with a 44.6% clip from deep that year. Averages just 8.3 a game. But when the Sonics made the playoffs this year for the first time in quite some time, the first time in the Gary Payton era, a major storyline of their first round series, Dana Barros starts the playoffs 9 for 9 from deep. Each of them seemingly being huge momentum swinging threes as the Seattle Supersonics win 3-1 over Golden State. Unfortunately, he cools off from there, shoots about 25% the rest of the playoffs, and they lose 4-1 to the Stockton Malone Jazz in the second round. Fourth season, at least on the court, he regresses a little bit. He is averaging 7.9 a game on 37.9 from deep, but he's starting to get this reputation within the league as a dead-eye shooter from long distance. And on the basis of that, he makes his debut in the NBA 3-point shootout that year. Following this fourth season, he's due for a change of scenery. And at first he gets traded to Charlotte for Kendall Gill, but within that same offseason, Charlotte trades him to Philly for Hersey Hawkins, which is an all-time great basketball name. Hersey Hawkins gets sent away. Dana Barros comes into Philly. And Dana Barros, for a guy that's looking for minutes in the NBA, he's stepping into a pretty good situation here with the Sixers, because in the 93-94 season, we're looking at the Sixers who had already traded away Charles Barkley, but had not yet gotten the more famous number 3, Allen Iverson. So there's plenty of minutes available on this team. If you're like any good at all, you're going to find your way onto the court. And with that being the case, Dana Barros steps in as a regular starter in his first year, starts 70 of 81 games. We see him average, to this point, a career high 13.3 points a game. He's shooting 38.1 from deep on about 4.5 attempts a game, so he's getting more leeway with the deep ball. While the Sixers finish this year 25 and 57.
There it
Barros,
is.
Yep. The Sixers finished 25 and 57.
It was just sounding a lot like the process Sixers when, do you want to play 30 minutes a game? Sick. We could use 30 minutes a game regardless of who you are.
That's 100% what it is. In another world, you could say that Dana Barros was perhaps the Tony Roten or the Michael Carter Williams of the early before the star got there process Sixers. But, I mean, people are recognizing his game. He finishes 7th in the most improved player voting and makes another appearance at the three-point contest. I would love to tell you guys how he's doing along the way with these three-point shootouts. The NBA has horrible record keeping with this. The only thing that you can look up is who won. But
presumably not Dana Barros.
Presumably not Dana Barros. The one thing I saw was a video from another one that we'll get to later. So I'll hold off for now. But going into his second year in Philly, he's now gained even more notoriety, as I said. Number 7 in the most improved player voting. And on the basis of that, and also I mentioned, he is a rapper. In 1994, and I feel like I've mentioned this album before on this podcast, but if I haven't, in 1994, the album B-Ball's Best Kept Secret was released. This featured some rappers of the time. Warren G was on it. But largely the gimmick here is that it's a bunch of active players dropping bars, spitting verses, and the whole rap album is all of these NBA players. You have Cedric Ceballos, you have J.R. Ryder, Gary Payton, Jason Kidd, even Shaq. But what is the first song that they lead off the whole album with? If you want somebody to listen to your album, you start with what's actually good, and you're going to go with Dana Barros' Check It.
Check It is very good.
I'm going to send to both of you real quick, and James, if you wouldn't mind.
Check it out now. Come on while I wreck it. Like I said, hold your head, son, and only take a second. Check it out now. Come on while I wreck it. Like I said, hold your head, son, and only take a second. Check it out now. Come on while I wreck it.
This is perfectly competent. I don't mean that as an insult in any way. That's it's not particularly memorable, but if you put it on a playlist, I wouldn't be able to guess which one was by the NBA.
It doesn't sound like a basketball player being a rapper. It sounds like a rapper just doing a rap song.
Yeah.
And, as I mentioned in the lead-in, for the first 5-6 years of the rights to Ricky Sanchez, basically all the years that the Sixers were not going to the playoffs, this was the theme song leading into it. So personally, that song was a lot of nostalgia for me. I mean, and Dana Barros, check it. He's pretty good. Check it out. You just listen to it. This album dropped mid-season. It dropped in November. And you can kind of take it out as a point where it's okay, Dana Barros could be the player who, when people discuss this album, are wait, really? Dana Barros is on the album? Or he could go out on the court and he could show exactly why he deserves to have that honorific and to be alongside Gary Payton and Jason Kidd and Shaq and all of these other basketball players who are rapping on the album. Starts all 82 this year. He averages 20.6 a game along with 7.5 assists. Shoots a career best 46.4 from deep on 5.2 attempts a game. And just some of his season highlights that I want to go through real quickly. He had a 50-point game, which we mentioned earlier, going 21 of 26 from the field and 6 of 8 from deep against the defending champion Houston Rockets.
The Rockets got by him and Corey Brewer.
There's something about this franchise that just attracts people to drop 50 on him. 6 boards, 8 assists. The Sixers did lose 136-107. And I believe until last year, this game, by game score, the advanced metric, was a top 100 game that had ever been played in the regular season of the NBA. And the Sixers still lost by 29. Remarkable. But another signature performance, he had a 25.10 rebound, 15 assist triple-double against the eventual Eastern Conference champion Orlando Magic in a 109-99 win. They actually won that one.
And beating album mate Shaquille O'Neal, if I'm not mistaken.
He did. He was claiming supremacy over the album. And, obviously that was a big contest. What was less of a big contest was on December 23rd, Dana Barros made a three-pointer. And he would make at least one three-pointer in every game for the rest of the season, which would set an NBA record. This NBA record would continue into the next season, but we'll get more on that in a little bit. For all of his efforts for this 1995 season, Dana Barros once again visited All-Star Weekend. He competed in the three-point shootout. He was also there as an All-Star. Dana Barros, a member of the 1995 Eastern Conference All-Star team. And after this season, he is a free agent. He's 27. He just made his first All-Star game. He's in the prime of his career. So I don't hold it against him whatsoever that he chose to leave the Sixers to go to another team with perhaps more promising prospects. What I will fault him for, at least a little bit, is he did have to go home and he went back to Boston. He signed with the Celtics.
It's the hometown team.
It's, of all the people who have ever signed with the Boston Celtics, of all the people who have left the Sixers to go to the Boston Celtics, Dana Barros has the most ethical and understandable reasons for so doing. I can give him a little bit of slack. He carries this 3-point streak into the following season, as I mentioned. The streak does have to end at some point. It ended at 89 games on a night that they played against, and I don't know if this is maybe a little pandering again, but Xavier, it was against the New York Knicks.
I don't know. He's a Celtic now, so I can't feel too good about anything that happens.
And you stopped his further pursuit of history with the New York Knickerbockers.
And they did so very intentionally, which is what I want to touch on here. It was late in the game. The Knicks had the game in hand. They're up like 20. Dana Barros checks back in with about 5 minutes left. And Don Nelson, the Knicks head coach, very quickly realizes they're trying to draw plays for Barros to get him a 3. So he calls timeout and he draws his team in for the huddle and he says, anytime they set a screen for Barros, you double him. Leave the guy, let him roll to the rim. I don't care. You double Barros, he doesn't get a shot off. Dana Barros doesn't get a 3 off the rest of the game. This made the Celtics head coach, ML Carr, who is a bit of a Celtics legend, and had some key plays on some of those 80s championship teams. He was so mad that he took the game ball at the end of the game and he threw it at Don Nelson. Put his arm around Dana Barros and was like, it's okay, it's okay. And Dana Barros honestly downplayed the whole thing and thought it was a little bit silly that his coach was getting so mad. But this is one of those things that has been lost to history, but I feel like in the modern social media age, this would have blown up.
That would have been an enormous evening.
A coach throwing a ball at another coach because he very deliberately and not for strategic reasons of trying to win the game. It's honestly, your Knicks have a fucking history of this, Xavier, because they tried to start fouling people when Wilt was going for 100.
That's not even in the top 5 of things that have happened with Knicks coaches in that 10-year period. We had Van Gundy holding on to Alonzo Mourning's legs. We had Latrell Sprewell choking out a coach. This is not even register on the radar of Knicks fucked up coach things. But it is still fun.
Just peak pettiness. And the fact that it's Don Nelson doing this shit too. Don Nelson is just such a character. We need to talk more about Don Nelson at some point. But for now, we're talking about Dana Barros. The streak does end, but he has the record for the most consecutive games with at least one 3-pointer made. That would stand until 2013 when Kyle Korver broke it. So it stayed in the Sixers family at least, even if Korver wasn't with the Sixers when that happened. Also, for that first season back with Boston, it is the 4th consecutive season in which he participates in the 3-point contest. In doing so, donning his hometown Boston Celtics green, he goes against Steve Kerr in the first round. They push at 19, but because of how other people performed, he makes it through to the semifinals. Semifinals, he makes it through. He goes against Tim Legler in the championship, and he loses. This was the second time that he lost the championship. I don't know the other time because, again, the NBA is horrible at record keeping as it regards. They're trying to erase the tapes. They don't want you to know how close Dana Barros was to being a 2-time 3-point contest champion. But that's why this podcast exists. We're here to remind you. We want you to remember Dana Barros. We want you to remember his 2-time silver medal in the 3-point contest. And, this is kind of honestly where his career ceases to be notable. He's very much in a mentor role with the Boston Celtics. That second season, he suffers an injury. He only played 20 games that year. And for the rest of his career, he never averaged more than 10 points a game. He was traded to Detroit after 5 years in Boston, played a few games for them, got released. He missed the entire 2002-2003 season. But what is very notable is, in a Moonlight Graham kind of way, He did re-sign with the Celtics for the 03-04 season, and he played in exactly one game. This wasn't like some charity send-off, like, oh, let him retire as Celtic. It was, they had injuries in the backcourt. They needed a point guard. Oh, fuck, I mean, Dana Barros, you still live in Boston, right? You just want to be on the roster for a couple of days? Goes in, plays this one game. He plays 11 minutes. Goes 2 of 3 from the field, 2 of 2 from the line for 6 points, but no attempted threes in that game. And when Dana Barros isn't getting threes up anymore, probably time for him to hang them up. And that ends his NBA career in 2004. Still very active in the basketball scene, though. Since then, he's been an assistant coach for Northeastern. He's been a consultant with BC. He's been on the New England Sports Network as a Celtics analyst. And most recently, he founded and is currently running his own AAU program based in Boston.
The continuation of the Boston youth basketball scene from his youth onward is a nice way to rationalize the Boston of it all. At least it's about kids.
Right. At least it's about kids. And also, while he is like Boston by birth, raised a Celtics fan, got to play for the Celtics teams that he played for, like, kind of sucked ass. So I think that's a redeeming factor as well.
Yeah, I do. I like that.
Like, you stop playing Dana Barros, the hometown kid, and all of a sudden you suck. Is there a coincidence there? Probably just coincidence. But it could be correlation. It just might. To me, Dana Barros, ultimately what his legacy is that he is one of the examples of a player who was very good and just played in the wrong era. Like, I think if you could have taken Dana Barros and Jahlil Okafor and you just flip-flop the times that both of those guys played, they're both 10-time All-Star, arguable Hall of Famers.
And vegan. And they're both
this
vegan.
Went from a like, yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't know.
Jahlil Okafor would have given you a consistent, like, the meme was, rolls out of bed and gets you 20 and 10. He would have actually rolled out of bed and got you 20 and 10 in the late 80s into the 90s. And I think Dana Barros, if he played in an era where, A, people understand the very simple math that 3 is more than 2, therefore you should take more 3 than 2. If there's more of an understanding of that math, if the way that the game is called now by officials, if he played in an era where there is no hand checking and where, let's be real, you get away with a lot more on off-ball screens. With those kind of factors going in, you could very easily see how a guy like Dana Barros would have been an absolute stud in this era. I'm not saying like a Stephen Curry level guy, but like CJ McCollum. He could have been a CJ McCollum at least in this modern era.
He could have been a Seth Curry.
He could have been a Seth Curry. Not quite a Steph. Could have been very good. And I'm certainly not here to say that he would have been any Allen Iverson. But he's also not a nobody. And I think that he is, in fact, the guy.
Well, interestingly enough, due to our format, our second guy will also be our second to last guy this evening. I think that's quite appropriate. And for our big old penultimate number 2, Xavier, I'm curious who this second guy will end up being.
Yeah, so as we all know, there's a shit ton of retired numbers in North American sports, to the point where sometimes it doesn't even feel that special for numbers to be retired. So I wanted to go in a different direction and pick a guy from a sport where this doesn't happen that often. And that meant it was time to go down under.
Crocky.
I'm so proud of you.
It is AFL time. And I don't think we've had an AFL player on the podcast before. So brief AFL rules and history time, like I've done for other sports that we've done for the first time. For those who don't know, Aussie rules football is a sport similar to rugby, more than like NFL football or association football, aka soccer. But there is actual kicking, a lot of kicking. The name actually makes sense. So there's 18 players on each team, and it's essentially broken down into 3 sets of 6, forwards, defenders, and then the middle, which is broken out between wingers and then the ruck team.
Bring the motherfucking ruckus.
every time there's a goal scored or the ball goes out of play, the referee throws the ball up into the air or bounces it really fucking hard against the ground to jump up in the air about 20 feet. And they put a really tall dude, like 6'7" to 7 foot up there to just smash into somebody else to try to tip it out like a center on the opening tip. But it happens like 50 times a game. There's an entire position that's just the ruck who does that. And then the ruck rover and the rover who are, despite being called different things, have essentially the same job of trying to get the ball once the ruck tips it. After you get the ball, you can run with it, but you have to dribble at least once every 15 meters. You can also pass it by punching it with your hand. That's the only way you can do a hand pass, by literally punching it, or by kicking it. If you kick it and it goes more than 15 meters in the air and one of your teammates catches it, then they essentially get a free kick from that spot. And they can either just keep going or stop and take the free kick, like with an advantage in soccer where you can choose to go or just stop and take it. From there, the way you score is there are 4 goalposts. There's the main one, and then there's 2, like an extra one on each side. If you're able to kick it through the main goalpost, you get 6 points. If you kick it through either of the side ones or bring it through a side one from any other way, it's an extra 1.
And I just need to say, because I love Aussie rules football. One of my favorite things about it is they have the refs there, like similar to how in American football, they're under the goalpost and, they put your arms up to signal that it's good. In Aussie rules football, they do finger guns when it goes through.
You also have people standing there to beat the shit out of each other to try to stop it from going in. So, like, imagine if instead of on a field goal block, everyone's rushing the kicker. No, they're like standing right there, ready to just bat it away from the goalposts.
It's fucking wild in the restricted area.
Yeah, it's fucking wild. And there's a lot of scoring in Aussie rules football. It's not uncommon to see games go into the hundreds. The other way to score is called the rushed behind, which is, so goal is through the middle goalpost, behind is through either of the side ones. A rush behind is if a defender under pressure just knocks it through his own side goalposts to avoid the forwards from getting it and being able to kick it through for 6. So it's essentially, I'm taking a safety to avoid them scoring a touchdown type thing. So that's a rush behind, that's an extra point. So those are the 3 main ways to score in Aussie rules football. I think that's pretty much all you really need to know. The only other thing is that it's a gigantic fucking oval that they play on. It looks more like a cricket ground than anything else. But that's pretty much it. With that, I want to talk about someone who did not have a long or distinguished career, really, but had a very interesting career as a ruckman.
Bring the motherfucking ruckus! Bring the motherfucking ruckus!
So today I want to talk about Max Bailey. Max was born October 23rd, 1986 in Western Australia. He grew really tall, really fast, so he was 6'9" as a teenager.
Nice.
So and he excels as a ruckman. The way the AFL works is that there's some minor leagues throughout the country, and the AFL drafts from those leagues. So they kind of just poach from these smaller minor leagues at any point.
So kind of, is it similar to, say, juniors with the NHL draft? Like they're going to the ECHL, the OHL?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's very similar to that. And so Max, he excels as a ruckman in his youth career with West Perth and gets drafted in 2005, number 18 overall in the first round by the Hawthorn Hawks, which is a team in Victoria. It's important to preface that for ruckmen to measure their success, you're really looking at a couple different things. The first one is the number of hitouts that they get, or the average per game. Like I said, anytime there's a score or the ball goes out of play, the ref will bounce it or throw it up in the air, and the ruck is supposed to tip it to their team. Anytime they do that, that's called a hitout. That's their main statistic to showcase how they do. And this is easily one of the most physically demanding position in all of Aussie rules football, because you are smashing into each other like at full speed to get this. People get like kneed in the chest, in the back, like they break bones and stuff all the time. And because of this, coaches often field more than one ruck because it's just not possible to ruck for the entire game without getting beat the fuck up. It's almost like a running back, where nowadays running backs have so much stress on them that we don't see many teams have just one. It's really a committee. That's how rucks are at this point, because it's just so physically demanding. And, when you're 6'9" and you've got a good youth career as a ruck, you're going to be in demand. So he gets drafted in the first round by Hawthorn. He starts off with the Box Hill Hawks, which is their reserve team. So it's those minor leagues that I talked about earlier. They have people who haven't been drafted, but they also can have reserve agreements with professional teams where they'll essentially like play some of your guys like a loan system, essentially, but a little more formalized. And so he starts off with the Box Hill Hawks, and then he finally makes his AFL debut late in the season for 2006, and he plays the last 4 games of the year. And they're like, all right, this guy is going to be our ruck for 2007. But then he tears his ACL in his right knee during preseason, and he misses the entire 2007 season.
Which presumably is not an uncommon thing for rucks.
It is not uncommon for rucks. Like I said, injuries are unfortunately very common for rucks because of the demand put on them, and also, they're just so tall and so much strain is put on them that lower body injuries is pretty common. He rehabs with Box Hill and finally gets a game in the VFL, the second division, with Box Hill in 2008. And he tears his right ACL again in that first game. So at this point, he misses all of 2008 and almost all of 2009. And he finally makes his return in week 21 of 2009, almost a full 3 years after he had last played in the AFL. He does really well. He has 23 hitouts and a win against Richmond. And they're like, okay, finally ready to play, to contribute. We've kept this guy despite these injuries because we know he has potential. And then the next week he gets Essendon. He tears his ACL in his left knee 5 minutes into the game.
He does get both legs then.
Yes, he does get both legs. So at this point, he misses all of the 2010 season as well. He has now been a professional for 5 years, and he has played 6 total games. The Hawthorn Hawks, they like him, they want to keep him, but they also realize, hey, well, he's not using his jersey, which was number 1. Maybe there's something else we can do with it. So they keep him, but they take his jersey away and retire it for the fans. Yes.
I have questions that I think we should save till later.
So on March 6th, at their annual Family Day, they announced that as of the 2011 season, the number 1 Guernsey, and to be clear, it is not Jersey in Aussie rules football. It is Guernsey, specifically. They look like tank tops. They do not have names on the back. They're either Guernsey or Jumper, if you're talking a little less formally, but they will beat the shit out of you if you ever say Jersey. The club announced that it'd be officially retired as a player number and presented as a tribute to the fans. They had Max make the announcement himself, saying that the fans are number 1. He then went to the cheer squad and brought them a giant Hawthorn Guernsey displaying number 1 on the back to the cheer squad, to the roaring fans. So this guy has not played in years, but they're having him take the Guernsey off his back and give it up to the fans in front of everyone.
Could you see his eyes moving and reading the cue cards during this terrorist organized video?
You know what? They've been paying him for so long without him playing. I'm sure he's like, fuck, but what can I really say?
Yeah, that's definitely their pitch from it, is like, you've gotten a lot of money. You owe us something. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I imagine that's 100% how that conversation went.
Like, just through a very forced smile. Well, the fans are number 1 to me.
They take away the number 1 from Max. Instead, they give him the number 39, which feels like that, hey, you're kind of still on the team, but we don't expect anything of you.
Number.
Hey.
Fucking special teams gunner ass number.
Got to shout out 39. Bruno Guimaraes wears it. It was his dad's taxi number. 39 slander will not be tolerated. I will stand up for 39s. I am now more on Max Bailey's side.
And you know what? Maybe giving over the number 1 broke this injury curse, because sporting the 39, Max plays in 16 games in 2011. He gets 3 goals, 3 behinds, which is a good amount for a ruckman who is not supposed to score. And he leads Hawthorn in hitouts with an average of 20.5 per game. With a healthy Max in the center, Hawthorn goes from 7th in the previous season to 3rd. They finished with an 18-4 record in the regular season, which is usually good enough for 1st or 2nd, but it was just a very competitive year. That 3 seed is key, though, because that gives Hawthorn the double chance. So I don't know how familiar you both are with the playoffs for Aussie rules. It's actually very interesting. Teams 1 through 4 play each other, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, and teams 5 to 8 play each other, 5 versus 8, 6 versus 7. The winners of the matches between 1 and 2 skip the next round, while the losers of those matches play the winners of the games between 5 to 8. So if you're one of those top 4 seeds, you technically get a double elimination for the first round. That doesn't matter after that, but for the first round, you get a double elimination.
You play for a bye week, essentially.
Yes. So that is important because Hawthorn loses to the number 2 seed, Geelong, but then beats 7 seed Sydney, with Max scoring a goal to make it to the preliminary finals. Preliminary finals is technically the semifinals, how we would consider it. They have the term semifinals for that first round of the 4 second teams. So I can't say, I'm going to say semifinals when I mean preliminary finals and ignore the other semifinals, because that is how we know of these things. Unfortunately, in the semis, Hawthorn blows a 17-point lead in the 4th quarter and loses 68-65 to bow out of the playoffs. Pretty brutal, like Atlanta Falcons-esque choke. But you know what? They're still excited. They're ready for a nice 2012 season. They're like, all right, we're on the up. We can do this. And then in preseason, Max suffers a very bad wrist injury and is out for pretty much the entire season.
Getting a different limb in the mix. Okay.
He comes back near the end of the year, but can't play much. And he is missed a bit as Hawthorn loses in the AFL Grand Final to the Sydney Swans. If Max was there, if he was healthy, would they have won the premiership? I don't know. I'm not saying that they would have, but maybe, depending on what I'm about to say for the next season. You might think after missing, at this point, 5 full seasons due to injury, and the team, they made the final without him, it might be time to call it quits, or Hawthorn might want to move on. But that wasn't the case. They're like, no, we still like you, Max. We want you back. We're not going to start you, though. We don't want to risk you getting hurt again by playing too much, so we're going to bring you off the bench. And then after the first game, they're like, oh, wait, no, he's still really good when he plays. He's back in the lineup. He plays 19 games in 2013, which is only one less than the previous 6 seasons combined. He scores 7 goals, 1 behind, and has 396 hitouts. He's one of the best ruckmen in the league. He's really, really good. And Hawthorn rolls through the regular season. They finish 19-3, and they get the number 1 seed in the playoffs. In the first round, they are facing Sydney in a rematch of that grand final from the last year. This time it's no contest. Hawthorn doubles them up. It's 105-51. Max gets his first ever postseason goal in this game, and they just crush them. In the semis, they face Geelong, who is their local rival. At this point, Hawthorn is suffering from what was called the Kennett curse. So the 2 rivals had met in the 2008 grand final, and Hawthorn upset the much favored Geelong. Like, you can consider it the Australian equivalent of Super Bowl 42, where Geelong had only lost 1 time all season. It's considered the massive favorite. They're the Patriots, and Hawthorn are the Giants. They're going to lose. It's fine. Hawthorn wins. And Hawthorne's president the next season says of Geelong, what they don't have, I think, is the quality of some of our players. They don't have the psychological drive that we have. We've beaten Geelong when it matters. As you might expect, that comment does not go along well with the Geelong players, who make a pact to never again lose to Hawthorne. From that point, Geelong does beat Hawthorne 11 times in a row. So this curse has been going on for a little while, and Hawthorne fans are very nervous about the semifinal. And after 3 quarters, it looks like it's going to continue because they're down 90-70 after the 3rd quarter. But then Hawthorne outscores Geelong 32-7 in the 4th to break the Kennett curse and make it back to the grand final. Max wins 18 hitouts during this game, the most of any ruckman in the game.
I mean, it always has to be something like that, right? Like, City have to go down 2-1 to finally beat QPR. The Red Sox had to go down 3-0 to the Yankees to finally come through and break the curse of the Bambino.
Cleveland 3-1 to Golden State. Cubs 3-1 to Cleveland.
Yes. Exactly. It always needs to be. It needs to have the perfect setup of, it's another one of this episode that I've seen 500 times already. And then very suddenly, we get the dramatic twist. Max Bailey has 4 functioning limbs and 1 win.
And at this point, they're ready for the grand final. They've banished the ghosts of last year by beating Sydney. They've broken the Kennett curse. And they're ready to face Fremantle. They go wire to wire. They win 77-62. This is only their 2nd title in over 20 years. And a first premiership title for Max Bailey. After the game, team captain Sam Mitchell said that Max Bailey was the greatest story of the 2013 premiership. I mean, how can he not be? He's the starting ruckman of a team that wins a title after having lost 5 of the last 6 seasons due to 3 ACLs and a destroyed wrist, which are 2 things you need if your job is to jump really high in the air and tap a ball behind you to your teammates.
Yeah, I was picturing him doing the punching with the broken wrist, and that seemed difficult.
Yeah, that's difficult, but again, his main job is to tap by jumping really high, smashing into other 6'10" and 11 and 7-foot dudes.
The ruck just sounds like somebody saw a scrum and said, this isn't dangerous enough. We need to make this more dangerous.
By getting bigger guys and throwing them in the air and having them jump and collide at full speed into each other. I do appreciate Australia's desire to somehow make blood sport that's safer than our blood sport, even though by all rights it should not be. So they got something right.
Well, it's all directed by George Miller, and he's very, very good with his stunt safety.
I'm just picturing Mad Max Fury Road. They start playing Aussie rules.
Yeah. This is now what they play at Thunderdome.
Oh, that's so good.
And Tina Turner still does the theme song for it.
1 month later, Max does surprise the team by retiring at the age of 26, but he retires a champion. Hawthorne's club statement called him the ultimate team member and club servant. Head coach Alistair Clarkson said that Max is undoubtedly one of the most loved and respected members of our club, and I'm sure that all board directors, staff, players, coaches, volunteers, and supporters who have been lucky enough to have been part of his journey will be sad to farewell him. His attitude towards the setbacks he experienced and his resilience in tough times have shown what an outstanding leader and impressive young man he is. Max can leave the game knowing that he did everything to get the most out of his body, and he should be proud of his achievements, which includes a premiership medallion that is thoroughly deserved. It was deserved, given, everything he came back from. But Max can't stay away from the game. He loves it too much. So he immediately gets into coaching with a lower division team, Richmond. Then he moves to Tanzania, where he works with the Future Warriors Project to assist Maasai communities in need of support, and spends 6 months, volunteering there, but also teaching them some Aussie rules football, which is fucking wild. When he comes back to Australia, he gets hired back by Hawthorn as a player development coach. And he stays there for 5 seasons. And in 2019, he's the head coach for the reserve team, the Box Hill Hawks, the ones that he spent so much time rehabbing with. Also during this time, Hawthorn unretires the number 1 Guernsey, but not for anything to do with Max Bailey. Instead, they have a new young midfielder named Harry Morrison, whose late godfather, Ken Judge, had previously worn the number 1 when he played in the mid-'80s and then coached in the late 90s. So they wanted to give it to him out of respect for his godfather. To recap, they retire his number 1 while he's still active because he's injured and make him physically give it away to the fans. He comes back as a coach, and while he's coaching there, they unretire it to give it to someone else, and then say, "Oh, actually, this isn't even just because of the family connection. We think we do other things for the fans, so the number 1 is going to go back in circulation after this. So the only person who doesn't get to use the number 1 is Max Bailey." Max takes this all in stride externally. I don't know how he felt internally. The next year, he does leave Hawthorn because COVID fucks the Aussie rules season. Especially reserve coaches are kind of super screwed. So he does end up moving into the business world. But as all guys are wont to do, he has more shit to prove. And 2 years later, December 2022, Max comes back to Hawthorn for the 3rd time as the general manager of football operations, where he is now in charge of all operational requirements of the AFL team and their AFLW women's team. Yes, Max is there to build out the women's Aussie rules football team, which we always love. It's just, I love it when someone like this who has such a passion for the game and has had pretty much every setback you can think of pushing him away, all the injuries, COVID taking away his job, he just keeps finding his way back. Like we talked about with Diaz and Dana Barros keeping going back to Boston. We've had our boomerang guys in the past. He's a double boomerang guy essentially with the Aussie connection. Crikey. But I just love the fact that every team has that guy that you think of where it's like, he may not have done a lot on the team, like when you actually look at the stats, but everyone loved him. He's a cult hero. He's a lifer, and he may have had his number taken away to give to the fans and then given back to other players after he retires. But, I just think Max Bailey is a guy, and a guy that is worthy of our recognition.
We are pleased to recognize the candidate from Down Under, Max Bailey, our first Aussie rules football one. We've got another first in our cap. I think I can continue that a little bit. We've had people dip their toes in what I have to discuss today, but we've never had someone operate full-time in the world that I want us to enter, if you all will bear with me. So, Diaz, you told us we're talking about numbers. And for whatever reason, I just couldn't shake the idea that I needed to talk about the biggest numbers. And I don't mean like your Wayne Gretzky, your Aaron Judge with the 99. I was thinking about just the physically biggest numbers in North American sports, which I will submit, I believe, are the numbers on the hoods of the cars in NASCAR.
They are massive.
They're very big. They're very big. And your mileage may vary on NASCAR. I was not personally a very big fan growing up, but there were enough people at like the summer camp I grew up in, some of the schools I went to, that like I got some knowledge through osmosis. And what I remember most vividly from this time was a couple numbers being like fundamentally associated with a couple guys. Like the number 43 car is Richard Petty. Number 99 back then here in NASCAR was Jimmy Johnson, like unquestionably. And especially here in like late 90s, early mid 2000s, when I was interacting with all these people who follow NASCAR, the number 3 car was inextricable from the Intimidator, Dale Earnhardt Sr. I do, though, have to take a moment here to be clear about something, because it turns out I'm cheating a little bit. I had misremembered something. When we were kids, while the number 3 was unofficially retired by NASCAR for quite some time following Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s tragic death at Daytona in 2001. We'll touch on that a little later. It has since been brought out of retirement a couple times for specifically like friends and family of the Earnhardts and of the Childress family. Richard Childress Racing was the ones that employed Dale Earnhardt Sr. at the time. However, while this does not fit the letter of the category, I do believe that going through the interaction of these racers, both Dale Earnhardt Sr. and the guy that I'm about to bring forward, I think it does fit the spirit. And so that's why I'm going to try and still share the story of this guy with you today. The guy from whom Sr. took the number 3, Ricky the Rooster Rudd.
I like the alliteration already.
Ricky the Rooster Rudd, Richard Lee Rudd, as he's born in September 12, 1956. And as many people with the initial R and the name Lee somewhere in there, he is from Virginia. So I don't think it's all that surprising he's going to be a future NASCAR racer. Early on, like when he's growing up by the Norfolk Naval Yards, he does have a dad, Al, who owns Al Rudd Auto Parts. He is around that, but he's going to start going initially to karting and motocross. These are his 2 early passions. Then comes 1975, and an 18-year-old Ricky, still in high school, in the tail end of his senior year. There's an old friend / uncle. He is referred to as both in a couple stories. I couldn't get confirmation one way or the other. So friend / uncle Bill Champion, phenomenal name, friend of the Rudd family. He is an independent racer, and he sets Ricky up just pretty much on a hunch that he's going to be good at it for his very first NASCAR event. This is his very first stock car race ever, North Carolina Motor Speedway, where he comes in 11th place. Gets up to like 10th at the next event in Bristol. He does a couple more races for like Champion Racing, but he's just kind of popping in here to dip his toes a little bit. However, he continues at it, again with the family. Now he's going to, for the next 3 years, be working a part-time schedule under his dad at Rudd Racing Enterprises. So now he's got a family friend and his own dad sponsoring him initially on. So we've got lovely shades of Nepo baby. He is going to start to get a little bit of attention. He wins 1977 Rookie of the Year in like this particular level of NASCAR. And he's got like 42 career races, 16 top 10 finishes, 1 top 5 finish by this time. The problem is that this is kind of a vanity project for the Rudd family, and Rudd Racing is hemorrhaging money. So like it's just not profitable for them. And Ricky, in order to be able to keep racing, is going to have to join another team. So he goes to his 3rd team. He's now going to Don Levy Racing. So this season, he's going to finish 9th in final points, does make the top 10. Next year goes back to like kind of a combo of his dad's team and another family friend who's just throwing money at this fire, thinking something's eventually going to catch, DK Ulrich, who is the father, the stepfather that is considered the father of actor Skeet Ulrich. Money still, though, has not improved. And so ahead of 81, he's got to one more time change teams. This is, I believe, his 4th and a half, if you want to kind of count both of the Rudd ones, in just his first 5 years. He is going to go to DeGard Racing, finish in the top 5, 14 this time, and he starts all 31 races. This is his first like full-time racing schedule, ranks 6th overall, once again in the top 10. Around this time, there's another guy who is doing pretty well this year. He's 7th, and that's Dale Earnhardt. Not quite yet senior. I believe junior may have been born, but like he's not getting referred to as Dale Earnhardt Sr. at this point. He is being referred to as the Intimidator, though. He's already taken the number 3 from that former driver and his new team owner, Richard Childress. However, while these two were like friends and had worked this transfer of the number out, Childress stepping back into the ownership role and Dale Earnhardt stepping in, they reportedly had like no chemistry that first year working together. It just didn't feel like the working relationship was there. And so he steps away and Childress figures, okay, I lost number 7 here with Dale. Sure, Dale's won a Cup Series before at this point, but he just finished number 7. Why don't I go out and get number 6? And so he signs Ricky Rudd. And Ricky Rudd gets plopped into the driver's seat of the number 3 car, in which he starts all 60 races the next 2 years for Childress. Ranks 9th both times, and in 83 gets his first 2 career wins, which are also the first 2 for Childress Racing. Earnhardt, those 2 years, 12th and 8th with 3 wins, so like there's not a huge gap. They're right in that same range. And so it's a little surprising that at the end of that season, Childress and Moore Racing do a kind of swap. Dale and Childress, for whatever reason, 2 years on from their frosty chemistry year, they worked whatever it was out. They decide they want to race again. Dale Earnhardt just really wants to race that number 3 car. It means a lot to him to take that from his friend Richard Childress. So they come, and Ricky just gets left out in the cold. Ricky Rudd is just like kicked to the curb by Childress Racing, but happens to get picked up by the racing company that now needs a number 1 with more racing. And so the two end up swapping, much kind of like when the Vancouver Canucks and the New York Rangers swapped coaches with Alain Vigneault and John Tortorella. Wasn't an actual trade, but when the two guys got fired and there were 2 convenient openings, just kind of worked out well that way.
That happens a lot in motorsports. I mean, especially you see it in F1 a lot with how structured F1 is with a clear best team. You might see like Mercedes poach someone from another like lower level team, and then they kick out their lowest performing driver who then ends up going to that team that now has an opening. And it's like, well, that guy is better than anyone we have, just not good enough for the best team. So he has nowhere else to go. Let's get him.
And that is exactly what Moore does. They land Ricky the Rooster Rudd, and we start the 84 season at the Daytona 500. This is now the 3rd season of the Daytona 500 being like the opening event, big season opener. And Ricky Rudd in his first race with Moore suffers a terrible crash. Like at one point, his car is vertical and the grill is skidding across the ground. It's very, very bad finish for him here at Daytona. He's got like bloodshot eyes from the pressure. There is a picture of him just looking like kind of demonic the next week, because despite this bloodshot, despite these like minor burns, despite what is almost certainly a concussion and several cracked ribs, he dresses up in a flak jacket. He tapes his swollen eyes open. And this is where we get the picture of like a truly demonic face of him in his little helmet with just these dark bloodshot eyes. And in this setup, he gets his lone win of the season for Moore this year. It is his second start, and it is one in a state that nowadays, because of this race and other examples, NASCAR will not let you compete in.
I mean, I can't imagine a higher stakes battling through injury than not being able to see fully while driving a 200-mile-an-hour vehicle.
Yeah, it's nuts. And like, this is not presage a launching pad for Ricky the Rooster Rudd. He is not going to catapult himself to new heights with Moore. He's going to continue to start every single race, does all 116 of the next couple seasons through the end of 87. And that means he is also with a win every year, at least one. He's now started all 7 seasons worth of races for the last 7 years. And he has had at least 1 win in 5 seasons and counting. Check on those streaks in a little bit. It's not bad, but during this time, the number 3 car, which has been re-inhabited by Dale Earnhardt Sr., having moved in at the expense of Ricky Rudd, finishes first overall in 86 and 87, wins a career high 11 races in 87, while Ricky Rudd is like, yeah, I'm starting every race though. So now that he has landed in that number 3 car, and it's worth mentioning, like, when he gets over there, like, Rudd does not mince words in saying he also believes that Childress got a much better team out there to like back up and support the car once he moved out and Earnhardt came in. He's watching the scoreboard. He cares about this rivalry. He's pissed off about how things went there. And it's starting to bubble to the surface now a little bit as we get into 1988. He is with King Racing. We're late in the season in Wilkesboro. Senior spins Rudd out, quote unquote, intentionally, under the words of Rudd. And this kind of knocks him out of contention. He races absolutely pedal to the metal as he can for the rest of the race to get up to Dale Earnhardt Sr. just to also spin him out, knocking both of them out of contention for the race. After this, the NASCAR CEO, Bill Francis, he comes in there to the pits to chastise him. And all that Ricky Rudd says, this is taken, by the way, for a podcast interview with Dale Earnhardt Jr. That is where he said, yeah, I'm disappointed in myself. Disappointed I didn't run that son of a bitch through the wall. Gets a $10,000 fine for that.
The monkey's paw curls.
Well, and believe it or not, this is not even their most notable dust-up at this track, because the next year at the Tyson's Holly's Farm 400, Senior's leading, Rudd's catching up. Rudd has a faster car at this time. Like, you know, they can see that in time trials. He knows, even if Senior's sometimes still a better driver. He makes a move to get around him, coming up on the back, at the exact same time that Senior does, and they both fully spin out, just like wrecking, not even a quarter mile short of the finish line. resulting in a very Steve Bradbury-esque win for Jeff Bodine, who just like skates through. And the crowd goes nuts. They start jumping over the fence. They start trying to like riot against the racers. The crews come out and have to like throw coats over them to get them to pit road to safety. This is an absolute fracas and a black eye for the league. And it's frustrating them that this rivalry is going on. And I'm not sure if this is the reason for his time at King ending, but he does then end with King Racing after this madness, which does not impact his Ironman streak. He does still go on 2 more years now without missing a single start and winning at least one race both times. Goes to Hendrick Motorsports. And in his first year, we have another notable crash. This one is a lot more tragic. He goes to pit in the season finale in Georgia, but his brakes lock up. And he strikes the car of the guy who was leading the race at the time, Bill Elliott, entirely unintentionally. This one fully an accident. Elliott's tire changer here in pit road, like as these brakes lock up and he hits him, Mike Rich is right there. He's pinned by the car. And he is, Mike Rich, cognizant enough as he's being taken out to like be asking if Elliott's still going to win, which makes it all the more heartbreaking when he does succumb that evening. The trauma surgeon makes it clear that it was an unsurvivable injury. Rudd feels terrible, and this is according to the LA Times reporting on the time. This is apparently also, according to the LA Times, the second tragedy in 3 years for Elliott's team, though I couldn't find what the other one was. But it's enough for NASCAR to say, hey, we got to do a little bit something about this. Some new speed limits are instigated. So once again, terrible crash, terrible medical incident by Ricky Rudd, making things safer for people, because like OSHA, all rules are written in blood. He feels awful about this. And like maybe if this had been in the middle of the season, he would have had to take some time off. But it was the finale. And so he comes back once again. It does not disrupt his streak. Has 4 more years with Hendrick, once again making every start, once again winning at least one race every year. But Hendrick has another racer in that last year on the team, someone you might know by the name of Jeff Gordon. Rudd knows that he's the future. Jeff Gordon is going to take Hendrick Motorsports to grand new heights. And Ricky the Rooster Rudd, he's been racing for 18 years now. You know, he leaves the team, but he does still have some more shit to prove. He takes main car sponsor Tide. Takes Tide with him. He becomes Rudd Performance Motorsports without Al at the front. It's just Rudd Performance Motorsports now. And he starts his own racing team. Much
with
as
blackjack and hookers.
Also with blackjack and hookers, I would have to imagine. Yes. There are a non-zero number of owner drivers like in NASCAR. It was a very common thing early on, but it had, at this time, as it became more of a business, like become 2 very different skill sets. Rudd driving the number 10 Tide car is like an all-timer in the owner driver category specifically. For 6 years, hey, get this. He once again does not miss a single start. I know this is hard to believe, but he continues to make every single race. And he continues to win 1 race each in 94, 95, 96, 2 in 97, and then in 98. He perseveres in Martinsville due to this just like busted cooling system. He is being roasted alive, very literally in his car, having to get pulled out later on with 2nd-degree burns all over his body. That is, however, enough for him to get his 1 win that year. But in 99, while he starts all 34, he does not win 1. That does end his streak at 16 years. 16 years with at least 1 win in a Cup Series. It's a very good run. And it's a very good run for him as an owner driver. But all good things come to an end. Rudd Enterprises does shutter after that year in 99. Now it's 24 years in. You know, maybe Rudd finally decides to hang it up. No, can't be. Ricky Rudd has more shit to prove. He's going to go join Robert Yates Racing. And he starts the new millennium. That first year, all the way back to 5th in the standings of the Cup Series, just a couple spots behind 2nd-ranked, 7 times Cup winner, Dale Earnhardt Sr. And late in the season, there is an episode between Rudd and Sr. 2 are like leaving the track in their own personal cars at some point. They happen to like roll up to a stop sign here in the parking lot right around the same time. They open their windows, chat with one another for a moment. Hey, let's go get dinner. They go eat out for the night. And they really, by all reports, this is again coming from the Dale Earnhardt Jr. podcast, this is when they buried the hatchet. And that is very good timing because about 6 months later, there is a tragedy at Daytona 500. This is Dale Earnhardt Sr. in like the second to last lap of the race, just suffering a fatal crash, and one that, much like the crashes of Ricky Rudd, one of which was at Daytona 500, did lead to massive redesigns in the cars. And so like now they are once again significantly safer because of this tragedy. It was the last one more or less of its kind as we enter 2024 now. In 2002, on May 26th, Ricky Rudd, he is racing in Richmond, not too far from his home, in the Coca-Cola 600. And having not missed a start since January 11th, 1981, this is his 656th consecutive. That does surpass Terry Labonte, officially making him NASCAR's new Iron Man. And there's pretty good timing because he has had a soured relationship with Yates during this time. I will give Yates Racing credit. They do make a very nice fancy paint job for the car on May 26th. It's got a whole thing saying like Iron Man 655th start. There's some nice touches there. But apparently, yeah, they get to the point where Yates and Ricky are having a fist fight in pit road later on in the season. So that does end his time with Robert Yates Racing.
It sounds a lot like when Barry Bonds was going for the home run record. It was like, okay, we'll let you get the record, but then you got to get the fuck out of here, man.
There are shades of that. There are absolutely shades of that. He gets to one more racing team for a little bit, Wood Brothers, brings it up to 788 starts as he goes into 2006. And that is when Rudd decides to end the streak, steps back for a year. He is quote unquote with a team, listed in a couple like different spots, but he does not race any race whatsoever. This was fully intentional. This was fully a choice. He's not hurt, just reevaluating life. Some moves the offseason between 2006 and 2007 relocate other racers. And as we mentioned earlier, nature in racing abhors a vacuum. And when there is an opening at Yates Racing, actually, we have the perfect object to fly into that. And Ricky Rudd signs up to make one last go round with Robert Yates Racing. There's like nothing particularly interesting this one. He's the elder statesman all throughout. He decides after this one, he is truly going to like hang it up. Points to one particular story for that is when he was talking with old-time owner Bud Moore and another old-timer David Pearson. He's having this long chat with them in the garage and they walk off. And one of his crew members that he works with comes up to him and is like, "Oh man, who are those guys?" He realizes that he's very, very close to kind of being that same thing. And maybe it is time to just walk away. And so he does. He's got an 11-year-old at the time, Landon, with his wife, Linda. And seems like he's enjoying retirement. He's got his pilot's license. He's had that since the 80s, and he's putting it to good use now. He is also, though, repeatedly finding himself on the ballot for the NASCAR Hall of Fame and coming up short of that. Now, there is the huge butter guy effect in his life of what if he had been allowed to remain in the number 3 car? What if Richard Childress had invested in him? Clearly, he and Dale Earnhardt were comparable racers. I'm not saying the same, clearly comparable. That being said, the question of like what Ricky Rudd could have been, I don't think that necessarily should discount one from the Hall of Fame, because I want to talk for a moment about some of those categories that we've alluded to, some of those streaks we've alluded to. His 788 starts. It was supposed to be a completely unbeatable record. It did get beaten by former Hendrick teammate Jeff Gordon, who has 797. But he's got like a strong relationship to that guy who ended up passing him, someone that he helped nurture early on. His 16 straight seasons of at least one win in a Cup Series, that is still today tied for the longest streak with Jimmy Johnson, who, again, we don't need to know a lot. I think, knew just growing up, like Jimmy Johnson was the fucking shit there for a little bit. His 19 seasons with a top 10 overall finish in the Cup Series is only exceeded by 2 racers, Jeff Gordon, once again, and the Intimidator, Dale Earnhardt Sr. So, like, there is kind of the rub. Those two got consistency. Those two locked in with Hendrick and Childress. Senior gets the number 3. He sets up shop. Rudd raced for 15 teams, including 8 during that streak of consecutive starts. He didn't have the prestige, but that did not stop him from competing day in and day out. He was never the best, but he was, I think, an archetype that you, Diaz, have touched on in boxing a lot. He was the guy that you had to beat to be the best for a long time. And as I read on him, I do think that he is certainly worthy of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I hope, in addition to that he is worthy of the Hall of Guy.
We love a good gatekeeper. We love a good mini boss.
He's the creepy hand guy from Ocarina of Time, Bottom of the Well.
Yes, Dead Hand, by the way.
Go.
Yes. No.
Horrifying monster.
Dead Hand was terrifying. I bet he fucking looked like Dead Hand after getting blisters all over his fucking body.
No, much redder. But he won. But will he win here? Here's the question to Mr. Bailey. The number has been brought out of retirement. It's only been worn by the one so far.
Yes. So as of this moment, Max Bailey is the second to last person to wear this number that was indeed retired. And I was thinking about this because Ricky Rudd is not the second to last person to drive this car number that was retired because of, was it AJ Dillon is doing it now? So technically third to last. So
I think even fourth to last. I believe that Junior, like, as a homage to his father at one point, where that's the like, it is very much, it is families doing it to honor Dale Earnhardt. The number is still associated with Dale Earnhardt. That's kind of went with the spirit, but absolutely he falls out of the category now. I would say I'm not as concerned about that because very easily down the line, Bailey could also fall out of the score. It's possible that he could lose eligibility later on down the road. And so
I mean, that's true for
Dana Barros is the only person who's straight up.
I mean, you never know. That could get unretired too. Like,
true. I don't think they're going to unretire Allen Iverson's number. Thank you very much.
What if there's a junior or a grandchild? I mean, that's the reason why they unretire things. If it's a family member or like a godchild or things like that, there could be another AI. You never know.
Okay, I mean, if you want to go with we can never really be sure, but I will say I'm the only one that like 100% fulfilled the prompt. You're both. I'm not saying either of you are at 0% fulfilling it, but you are on a little bit shaky ground as we begin debating.
No disagreement whatsoever. I get we'll have to go back and check the tape when I do the editing later, whether you said second to last person to wear a retired number or just second to last person to wear a number, because Xavier is currently in compliance if it was just second to last to wear a number.
I believe I said retired. I also think I might have said it after we ended the record last week.
Well, you said it in the beginning this week.
Oh, yes. Fair.
Allen Iverson's son, his name is Mr. Mr. Iverson is his son?
No, Mr. Iverson is my father. Please, call me Mr.
Right. That's fucking elite. There was Ryan Iverson that played for Delaware when I was growing up, but he was very white, and I think his was with an E on the end. It was like the Swedish equivalent of Iverson. But back to the other number 3. Dana Barros has a very strong what-if case for a guy that should have been remembered. And one thing that to me was notable when I was doing my research is like, there's a lot of YouTube videos of like, Nick Van Exel talks about how good Dana Barros could have been. Like Gary Payton talks about how good Dana Barros would have been like in this current era. So he has the acknowledgement from his peers of how good he was, which I think maybe should be a bit of a factor here. I'm not saying it should be the dominant factor, but I think it's worth consideration.
I have to make an amendment. It is his half-brother, who is younger by over 20 years, whose name is Mr. Allen Iverson.
That's even worse. That's significantly worse than being the son.
I would say so. This is Iverson's. Yeah, Iverson's mom, I guess, gave birth to Mr. Allen Iverson.
Dad, I think.
His dad,
well, not give birth, but
Mr.
like fathered Mr. Allen Iverson.
Seared, reared, sired. There we go.
Sired, as we talk about
Stormcat style.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the horse that fucks. Exactly. I was gonna say Mickey Mouse, and I was like, that's a different one. That's a different animal.
That's the bull.
Here's my one thing on Dana Barros.
The fact that you don't remember his name during the recording is not a great sign.
My thing with Dana Barros is I don't know what the relationship with Allen Iverson is. And in both the cases of Ricky Rudd and then in the case of Bailey, not with this modern guy who is playing, but with the people for whom the jersey was retired. Like he presented the retired jersey to the fans. There is slightly more connection to the story of the number. Dana Barros,
it makes for a better story. It makes for a better story that you do have this relationship between Ricky Rudd and Dale Earnhardt. You do have, even with Max Bailey, like obviously the relationship with the fans, but he's with the club and has to
coach and general manager while watching this guy have his number that was retired, right? To take away from him to dedicate to the fans.
To be fair, he was much better in 39, as we've discussed.
He was much better in 39. I just imagine like Max Bailey watches whatever the fuck the new guy that got to where number 1 is. His name's not important. You don't need to tell me what it is, Xavier. But I just imagine Max Bailey walking past him in the lunchroom and the Curb Your Enthusiasm anthem just starts playing.
I mean, we're trying very hard to not say cuck again, I feel like.
Right. It is a little bit of... It's at least cuck adjacent. It's not on the same street as cucks, but you can see the cucks from where he is.
The cuck chair has been like moved into the building, but it's not in his office right now.
It's an auditory experience.
He's cuck curious. He's visiting subreddits. He's learning more.
And with that, I will say that we have had more interesting conversation about Max Bailey than Dana Barros.
Look, I also just accept the bar is like high to repeat, and I mean, I do think there's a lot of fun little things about Dana Barros, that he was on the rap album, that he does make an all-star game, that he is in 4 consecutive 3-point shootouts.
The rap album, I will say, like, of everything, like, Dana Barros' story, the only thing that really felt like notable to me was the rap album. And then I listened to the song, and I have to say I was not a fan of Check It. I don't think it was that good.
I mean, like, how good was rap at that point anyway?
Very good. Are you kidding me? Early 90s?
At the highest levels, sure. But, like, this is like, fine.
I don't know. My dad loved early 90s and late 80s rap, so I grew up listening to that stuff.
Look, all that's fair. I mean, really, I just wanted to use it as an excuse to talk about another Sixer. The thing that I was disappointed in.
That's fair enough. That is the most honest thing you've ever said in this podcast.
Listen, I will put my cards on the table. I was also disappointed because if you remember when we had our conversation with AU about Sixers guys, and there's a book that's literally written on this. Dave Reuter wrote the book on Sixers guys. It's called A Sixers Odyssey. It has, let me just double check on the number of guys that he covered in this book. He doesn't have his chapters numbered, but I mean, like, each of these is a guy. These are all guys with different nicknames. There's that, and then there's even more on this page.
I would have to guess it's approximately 76. It feels too obvious to not do that.
76 feels like it's right. Dana Barros wasn't one of them. So if I want to say that as a point against him, that in the literal book of Sixers guys, his chapter is not written.
That's pretty wild.
That's pretty bad, actually. That's
arguably 2G for that book. So
I don't think it's that. I think it's too, like, we've talked about this. One All-Star game is essentially the marker of a great guy. But
yeah, right. One-time All-Star Vicente Padilla.
I thought Vicente Padilla was 2-time All-Star.
Did he get a second one? I only remember the one with the Phillies. The All-Star games that are made in Philadelphia are the only ones that count.
I need to double check this.
Just sparkling midsummer classics.
No, he was only one time. You're right, Diaz.
And it was the last time that they tied it because I stayed up late to watch that. 9-year-old me was pissed. But let's focus. I'll narrow it to Max Bailey and Ricky Rudd.
I thought I was gonna have X because I thought he was going to be like, oh yeah, Max Bailey, handed over the number to the fans. I was like, oh, well then he wasn't the second to last person to wear it. Like he was the last person to wear it.
I had that loaded in the chamber, James.
And I felt good for a lot of that because I was like, cool, then I will have more of a leg to stand on my misremembering of Ricky Rudd. I feel, first off, I'll also say, like, he's an old white man from Southern Virginia. He's talked about how, like, racing needs to go back to the good old days. It is tough for me to, like, truly go to the mat for Ricky Rudd.
Ooh.
There's definitely an article out there about how Ricky Rudd doesn't think the Bubba Wallace controversy was a big deal.
I think it's less that, and it's more like the racers ain't tough these days, which is still not good, but, like, is slightly less I don't know, bigoted.
When we have that versus a guy who's working to develop the women's game in his country, that is a tough thing for us to personally recognize with how the three of us personally are.
But if anybody has the right to say racers are soft these days, it is the person who won a race and then gave the victory speech while lying on the ground with second-degree burns and an oxygen mask on their face. Yeah. That is the person who is allowed to say that.
He crashed at Daytona and didn't die, senior.
I prefer my NASCAR drivers who survived.
R.I.P. to Dale Earnhardt, but I'm built different. Ricky Rudd can say that.
Oh, God.
I'm glad they cleaned things up before that happened. No, I find myself pretty hard pressed to go with someone that I know technically does not qualify against someone who may not qualify someday. And
but as of now,
however many years down the line for RTG, 256 or whatever, when someone else gets the one for Hawthorne, I will request that at that point we revisit this. But I think I go towards Mr. Bailey.
I think with that concession, we can make the announcement then. And this is like a 2.25 out of 3. I think I don't want to quite call it unanimous because I do like Dana Barros and I forgot his name, but that's why he's not the guy.
You each forgot each other's guys' names.
To be fair, I missed up one letter.
Ricky Rudd. Ricky Rudd. It would be rude to not remember Ricky Rudd. Ricky the Rooster Rudd would be rude to not remember. I did just not remember. But, I think that's kind of the evidence that we need to be able to firmly say that it is the man who played 6 games in 5 years, who barely was able to get a full season in with functioning limbs. But when he did it, he powered his team to victory. And so they honored him by unretiring his number that wasn't even his number, but he did do it in the famous number 39, which I do love very much. And it makes me very proud to welcome into the Hall of Guy, Max Bailey, a name who shall never be forgotten again within these halls.
Our first Aussie rules player.
Congratulations to Max Bailey, our inductee this week. If I may, after this induction, borrow everyone's ear for one more second. Recently, a guy by the name of Timothy Burke has found himself in the news. He is a sports journalist and just a general journalist whose work I promise you are aware of, because even if you haven't heard the name Timothy Burke, you probably have heard the name Manti Te'o. And Timothy Burke was at Deadspin in 2013 when he broke the Manti Te'o catfish story. More recently, in 2018, he's like a video editor primarily now, and he put together that synchronized clip of local news stations all reading the same dispatch from Sinclair Broadcasting. This was featured on John Oliver. You've seen his stuff. You're aware of Timothy Burke. Even more recently, he leaked some behind-the-scenes Tucker Carlson clips, including just like some terrible shit that Tucker Carlson said, some terrible shit that Kanye West said, and this all came out right around the time that Tucker Carlson was leaving Fox News. But now, couple years later, Burke has just been arrested on February 22nd, 2024 with charges of conspiracy and wiretapping. I have read his statement, and frankly, if 1% of it is true, then the charges of this being like any kind of hacking to get this are false. He followed a lead on a public URL, accessed information without any credentials, published it to the world. He did research as a journalist. And it was good for people to know, and now he's being punished for it at a time when a lot of journalists are having some issues with employment, we'll say. So I just wanted to take a moment to share this about someone that has been in the sports ecosystem and is currently hosting a page for donations to what is going to probably be a considerable legal fund. I will include that link in the show notes today. I just wanted to say that moment about Timothy Burke. Anything else from you guys on the way out?
Diaz, Puerto Rico women in the CONCACAF Women's Gold Cup. A draw against Colombia tonight sets them through to the knockout stage for the first time ever.
Holy shit. Well, Xavier just told me about the most important game of my life that I learned about 3 hours before it happens.
Beautiful.
A draw against Colombia, and we are through. Colombia, I think, is pretty good, though. And I think since it would be the first time that we would make it to the knockout stages of the Gold Cup, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're probably historically not that good.
I will say, of the 11 previous Gold Cups, They only ever qualified for one of them and lost all 3 games, giving up 38 goals and scoring 0. So that is Puerto Rico's history.
Outing ever.
This is the best Puerto Rican women's team of all time.
Already, inherently. Is it probably, is it a 10 p.m. kick?
It looks like it is starting right now, actually.
Oh my God, we need to finish, people. Highway the Boricuas. It is the most important game that I've ever learned of as it was happening. I mean, throw in the Price is Wrong horn, throw in the Price is Right noise, throw in whatever happens here. I'm going to say it. Puerto Rican women get the result. Puerto Rican women are through.
Puerto Rico is through, and I am still one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I've been Diaz, and as William Shakespeare once said, beware the guise of March.
Diaz, your heart rate just said 201 a second ago on your watch.
It's opposite, so it was 102.
Okay, still not great.
That's a big difference.
I think I peaked at 180 when I ran the marathon. So if I was at 201, watching this penalty shootout, that would not be good. All right, so it's 2-2 through 3. Up steps Elliot Anderson, who we just subbed on 10 minutes ago for the first time he's been playing in 3 months. This seems very ill-advised. I'm just going to say that. That seems like the last guy that should be doing this right now. He looks like he knows that too. There's very bad energy on this. There's very bad energy. He's fucking forward. Let's go.
It's also fascinating because I still am 10 seconds ahead of you. And so I'm just not reacting whatsoever and then waiting for your reaction.
I mean, the good news is I'm not looking at you at all.
I know.
This guy looks like a fucking psychopath. I don't like that. There's nothing behind those eyes. Oh my, fucking okay. The stream froze for a second.
Now I'm trying to read Xavier because Xavier's making a face. There we go. There we go. I was like, I think I know what that face is, Xavier.
I saw it, and then Diaz immediately said the stream froze, and I was like, oh no, is he going to miss it?
You like made a face too. If he had been looking, like he would have known that you were reacting to something. But
I reacted to him saying that the stream was frozen. Other than that, I wasn't going to react. But
woo! Thank fucking God.
How way the